very much. Again, good morning. As Mike said, I'm Jennifer Wimhoff with the Groundwater Foundation. Appreciate you guys taking time, I'm sure, out of a very busy schedule here at the convention to come and listen about the Test Your Well program. A little bit of background about the Groundwater Foundation. If some of you aren't familiar with us, we're a national nonprofit organization based in Lincoln, Nebraska, and our mission is strictly education. We educate and motivate the public to care about and for groundwater. So that's what we do. So the Test Your Well program really fits in with our mission, and we've been lucky enough to work with the Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department for many years on different things, and we're able to work with them on this Test Your Well program. Some of the things we're going to cover today in the workshop, briefly go over the agenda. John Chess is going to give us some program history, how we got to where we are now, where the program kind of evolved from. And then we'll hear from the Raymond Central FFA students and advisor who we have over here on the wall. They'll talk about what the program has done for their group, and then they'll also give a demonstration of the testing procedure for nitrate tests. So we'll look forward to that. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about a manual that the Groundwater Foundation has developed in partnership with Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department and also with funding from Cargill and the Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality that basically describes this program. It's kind of the program all in a nutshell, gives resources and things, hopefully to get the program out there to different FFA chapters, not just in Nebraska, but around the country as well. So again, we're glad to have you with us today, and I will turn it over to John, who will give you some history about the program. So.
Wait seconds. Okay. Good morning. I'm John Chess with Lancaster County Health Department. I won't give you a background agency because I think it's pretty evident with the Health Department. What I want to do in the first 15, 20 minutes is go through the background and the history of the program of how we got where we are today, and some of the lessons we learned along the way, and why the program is doing what it's doing, and how we're doing it, and why we're doing it the way. Then I'll turn it over to Jeff. Jeff and I have worked together since the mid-'90s. All the way back to contaminant source inventories on some environmental projects. And I think he can tell you and really emphasize the value of what this program has meant to Raymond Central. They've been ongoing now since the inception of the program. They've offered anywhere between 3 and 6. And I'll leave it at that rather than take away Jeff's thunder. So essentially, initially when this program started, it was called Safe Water Tomorrow Through Pollution Prevention Today. Today it's simply known as Test Your Well for pretty obvious reasons, because that's a mouthful to say. It's also a mouthful to type every time you want to write a grant application. So it's just basically Test Your Well. Okay, in '93, '94, the Lancaster County Health Department got a grant to go in and determine the recharge areas for our 10 villages, 2 cities, and a rural water district. And our villages are defined by less than 300 in population. Cities are defined by 1,000 to 2,000 in population. And of course, the rural water district takes the water in our South Lancaster County and ships it up to many private homes. And EPA back in the 80s got on emphasizing communities going out and determining where their water is coming from, going into those areas and finding potential sources of contamination and doing efforts to wellhead protection to save their water supply or make their water supply safe. Part of the project was to rely on community volunteers to go into those wellhead protection areas and go up to farmers and ask, okay, how many gallons of fuel do you store here? What's your chemical load? Count the number of homes in there, the number of septic tanks, look at the businesses, try to get a handle on how many gallons of fertilizer or anything else they stored. If you had a county engineer, what kind of containment procedures they had for gasoline and things like that. This was all supposed to be gathered by community volunteers. Okay, prior to doing this, the volunteers were subject to 2 nights of training. They were taught to use a compass, which if you haven't been in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts is a pretty challenging thing. If you haven't ever read a compass like you should, learning how to complete the questionnaires, know what questions to ask, and then locate the information on a map. And then we can study the map to see what potential problems were in that recharge area. Okay. During that project, we developed, and this is based on Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau came out in a check as kind of a precursor to Farm and Home Assist. but they came out with a very simple checklist for pollution prevention ideas on a farm. We took that idea with their permission and developed our own checklist, and we also developed a checklist for acreages and homeowners. And basically all it is just about 100 different things where they go through a questionnaire. What can we do to protect our groundwater? Yes, no, things like that. Very simple, not complex. Okay, after we completed that project, we got another small grant to do other wellhead protection areas. Those included the 4 rural high schools in Lancaster County: Raymond Central, Malcolm, Norris, Waverly. Let's see, left Waverly out. To go ahead, and they also had well protection areas because they're in municipal water supply by EPA regulations. We, and I skipped this part, I'm sorry. At the end of the first grants, we also had money in our pollution prevention program where they wanted us to contact the farms in the wellhead protection areas that we delineated. We had 13 what we would define as true farms. And those farms were active farms, had tractors, not the acreage farms that you were familiar with. What the incentive was and what the object was to have the farms complete the checklist. And if they were to complete that checklist, what we would do as the department would offer them a free VOC scan of their drinking water and a Nebraska pesticide scan. That was worth about $500 worth of free water testing. We had 8 out of the 13 agree, and I went and met with each one of them. They completed the checklist. So we knew there was some interest there, and we learned a lesson there that even a regulatory agency could offer some education if you had an incentive, and that was $500 with free testing. Skip to the next. We got the new grant project to do the remaining public drinking water supplies in Lancaster County. We had, is not surprising, a tremendous time finding volunteers, adult volunteers in communities to take time to do the contaminant source inventories. You're talking about a day or two worth of effort. What we knew was it wasn't really that complex. Since we had our 4 rural high schools, we thought, well, why don't we approach the 4 rural high schools, especially the chemistry, the physics departments? And we did. And we got pretty good. We got agreement from Waverly. We got Malcolm right away. We didn't hear back from Raymond Central. We didn't hear back from Norris. We met with the NRDs, and in Nebraska, we have 23 natural resource districts. They are charged with water quality and quantity as far as protection. And they also have water projects. They give the permits of drinking water. They also do nitrate screenings. They do groundwater management areas. They identified that if we wanted to talk to someone at Norris and talk to Raymond Central, that we should contact Jeff Shellpepper or Doug Malone. They were noted for working with their FFA and community projects. And we did. And they were interested, and they signed up. We trained the student volunteers to do the contaminant source inventories. I spent 2 days with the students during the summer, and then we went into the wellhead protection areas and did the contaminant source inventories. I was always with the students. And one of the lessons we learned very significantly was we were at a home, and the students were talking to the residents saying, do you have a septic system? How many people live in your home? Do you have any fuel tanks? Do you have any tractors? Do you farm? Those kind of very basic, simple questions. The resident was very delightful to deal with the students. At the end of it, being a regulatory agency, he looked at me and he says, I'm going to tell you nothing, absolutely nothing. You can leave here now. Students, great. Take all the time he wanted. I was standing 5 foot from the students. So we learned important lessons that the students can open the door to give information to people, possibly to change and modify behavior. If it came from a regulatory agency, it kind of fell on deaf ears. So that was a very important lesson we learned during that project, reinforced a lesson we should all know. We again offered, our pollution prevention people offered, if the students would contact, again, now we're starting to move towards the students as a vehicle of information and talk about pollution prevention. We again offered the students the opportunity, if they would contact the farm, a true farm, if they would contact them and have them complete the checklist, we would do the VOC testing and the Nebraska pesticide scan for free. The students would draw the VOC, and the VOC is kind of tricky to draw. but we would let them do it as a learning experience. The students, then we identified several farms, but the one that stands out was the one in Raymond Central's area. We went to it, and we had 2 students. It was 10 degrees that day. The wind chill was 30 below. I mean, the wind was just bitter cold. This gentleman had been born in the farmhouse, and he was probably 75 at the time. So you can imagine the age of the house. He had no indoor plumbing. At least he said it wasn't working that day. We had to draw the VOC from an outside hydrant. So you can imagine the wind whipping. So the students formed their back to protect the water so it wouldn't blow out of the stream, got their water sample. This was an old, craggly, bearded gentleman, torn ragtag coveralls. We went down the equipment supply, the equipment shed where he fixed his equipment, tractors, and there was an old oil heater, and it was about 95 degrees in there. So the kids went over the checklist and answered all the questions. When they got to the part about fertilizer and application, this gentleman went into a dissertation about nitrate levels, soil levels, testing should be done that would put a PhD to shame at the university. Prior to that, the kids were kind of looking at this craggly old gentleman going, look at this house, look at this operation, it can't be much. This gentleman had some tremendous information to share with the kids. Their eyes just dropped, their eyes opened. It was just, wow, this is impressive. Almost as impressive as we went to the next house to get a VOC sample, and the old gentleman went into a dissertation about water witching. How many of you know what water witching is? The kids had never been through water witching. And this gentleman took him around the farm and said, we tried to drill a well here. We tried to drill a well here. He's talking 30 years ago. We tried here. We could never find water. We got a water witcher. He said, drill here. We found water. Those kids learned a valuable lesson that day about how things used to be in farming and the way things were done many years ago. Lessons learned. Students can learn from the people they talk to in interviews. So we brought that lesson away. Okay. Okay. The next step was in the project. We completed that project. And there's the old saying, quid pro quo. Waverly contacted me and said, you know, I was good enough to loan you a couple students, and they helped you out in your project. It's coming near the end of the semester. I need a water chemistry project. What can you do for me? So I went out and met with Jeff, and he also had the same name as Jeff Shellpepper. And we talked about it. We talked about having the students go out and complete that checklist. And if the people would complete the checklist, then we would do a free nitrate test. We developed a program to go along with the checklist. It takes about 2 days to go through and teach the kids how to respond about that checklist. So the kids were charged with finding a rural resident with a water supply, go out and complete the checklist, get the water sample, and come back. We kept the name confidential because we were really concerned as an agency, and initially we were really concerned about the level of confidence we needed to keep with nitrate supplies. From that point on, we would meet with the students. They brought the water samples back, and what we found out, the kids didn't have a lot of knowledge of nitrates. We went to Extension, pulled their information about nitrates, the health effects, pregnancy, 10 parts per million. We had a half-an-hour session on the health effects of nitrates. The students were then charged to take that information and go back to the participants and explain to them about what nitrates and their significance was. We closed the loop. And that's probably the thing in the nation that I saw different testing projects that wasn't going on. There was nobody closing the loop. We saw a massive testing project in Indiana where kids went out and collected water samples, but there was no follow-up back to the people to explain what the health significance of nitrates were. So when we decided another lesson, if we're going to do a project, we wanted to close the loop and have the kids charged with going back with getting the information to the people. Okay. As time went on, we continued to do the presentations. Went down to Norris, went down to Raymond Central, and continued to do this kind of haphazard, not haphazardly, but on a semester basis. But we thought we had a pretty good idea. Where the students had the information, public was receptive to it, students could learn from the people. We had a very good idea. We now needed to bring it together. So what we did, and one piece of information I didn't cover, is that when we were doing the student project in the schools, we were getting a survey result that over 50 to 75% of the people did not have their wells tested within 5 to 10 years as an average. We found very few people that was less than 5 years. If it was a new well. So what we did was we worked with Raymond Central to do a environmental trust grant. In Nebraska, when they set up the environmental trust, or a lotto, they designated a certain percentage of monies that had to go back in environmental projects. And then we funded Norris through a 319 project. Everybody know what 319 monies is? Basically, it's federal EPA money that flows through your environmental quality state division, and it's targeted towards water quality. So we had met with Mr. Albert Trailer and sat down and solicited money from him. There are many grants available through that agency up to $5,000. So I would suggest you go back and contact, we call it Nebraska Department of Environmental Quality. Every state has an environmental quality agency. Ask for the 319 people and ask for mini grants if you're interested in this. There's money up to $5,000 on short grants available. Okay. What we decided to do to further benefit the students is we decided to go ahead and have the students contact the local government to see if they could use the hall. We decided what we would do is have a one-night event. We had the testing equipment, we had the technology, so we decided to go ahead and meet in a village hall, a government hall, and see if the people would come. Part of the project to teach the kids about local government was to have them go talk to the village board. And we went down to Denton, one of our first ones, and of course we got put on the end of the agenda. We sat there for 2 hours while they got their road report, they've got this, they got that, and about 15 minutes before the end of the meeting, we got into a village turmoil over the Village of Denton Historical Society. And you can imagine a village meeting after about 2 hours, the backs are getting a little sore, people are getting a little testy, but the issue was that the Village Historical Society had always had a free will offering for 20 years. Now they're going to start charging to use the hall for the fundraiser for the Historical Society. That capped about a 25-minute discussion. So now we're talking about being there till 9:30. And finally, one of the village chairs says, the hell with it. If they're a nonprofit organization, they can use it. If they've come down from Omaha, they can use it if they're nonprofit. So now, 2.5 hours later, everybody wants to go home. The FFA student gets up in front of the village board and just says, I'm from the FFA and we want your hall. And he just, oh, here we go. So I got up, we started talking about the reasons. The village member at the end of the hall said, best damn project I've heard of. I'll be the first one there. Comes to turn out that 2 other board members, one was a former chapter president from Scotts Bluff, the other was Mr. Doug Malone's first female student president in his organization. The mood turned once they found out it was FFA. High recognition, high sense of responsibility for a student. Bottom line was, here's the keys, great project, call us when you're done, anytime you want. We kind of phased that project, yes. Okay. We kind of phased that part of the project out because as this went across Lancaster County, everybody had heard about it and we got carte blanche. We could use the village hall anytime. So Denton had 75 people show up that night. We went up, Raymond Central had one at Davie. Davie had over 100 people show up. One of the keys is that we worked with our county assessor's office, who, guess who was a former FFA member, and his kids were former FFA members. He was a computer head of our assessor's office, and he could crank out mailing lists for everybody in the county based on census tract, Jeffersonian method of measurements. Anywhere we wanted, they could give us a mailing list of owners. So we started cranking those out and getting people to come. The result was over 15 test your well events were held. Basically, we got a community. They were held at pancake fundraiser feeds, a variety of different events. They went over well. They were well received by the public. Essentially, we'd identify a student coordinator to greet the people when they came in. They'd say, welcome, you're here to test your well. They'd send them over, and the kids would test your well, test the water. They'd have them sit there. They'd get a little slip of paper. We'd go to serving coffee and rolls, because what we found out, all that concern about confidentiality was for nothing, because people would sit there and go, I got 8, Mike, what do you got? Bill, I got 7. It was kind of like, oh, okay, this is what I got, this is what I got. Tremendous interaction. There were times we had to shut the lights off to get people out of there. At Denton, it was 9 o'clock before we got them out of there. At Davie, we had to get them out, because it became a social event for the people to get together. They talked about nitrates. The kids also gave out the checklist and talked to people about pollution prevention, talked about the health significance of nitrates. So we had 15 events. We had average anywhere between 10 to 73. We had 100 at Davie later on when we re-offered them. At this point, we knew we had a very successful program. We were partnered with a very good agency, a vehicle. We were non-regulatory, just information. Students won because they learned. People won because they learned. It was a win-win situation. We decided to approach 319 monies and go statewide. What Lancaster County Health Department did was hire a coordinator, and they started working with the western part of the state or any schools outside Lancaster County. Which, if you know anything about Nebraska, there's the eastern half of Nebraska, there's the western half of Nebraska, and the twain doesn't meet, as they say. They don't recognize us, and we don't recognize them. There's that kind of animosity between urban and rural areas. We were greatly concerned about a local health department going out to Kimball, Nebraska, or Valentine, Nebraska, and saying, we got this project to help you. What would the reaction be? Especially the high rural nitrate levels, what problems would he run into? What we found out was there is the limited resources, as you know, in schools today. We were welcomed with, the program was very well received, very well welcomed. So we've been through 40 to 50 schools over the last 2 or 3 years, 2 different coordinators. We've had up to 93 water tests in Kimball, Nebraska, which is a very small community. Okay, after we knew that was a statewide success, the next level was to look at going regional or national. But what we needed, again, this is a student-driven, FFA-driven. What we did was we brought together a youth symposium of FFA students that had been involved in it. And of course, the first one got snowed out, the second one got snowed out, but we did end up having 7 western schools primarily, and 1 Raymond Central, where the kids sat down in a panel and talked about what they saw this program as success, why it was successful, why they like to be involved in it. And for their participation, we each gave, everybody got a shirt for being part of the youth symposium. And one of the things we've always put on our grant money is money for hats and shirts, because the kids like to design these, and that identifies them with, they put their FFA logo, water testing, things like that. So we've always put money in that for an incentive for kids to get shirts. So what we did was we put that together. We got some grant money. We've been working with the Groundwater Foundation to produce a manual that obviously you just can't send a coordinator across the nation, but we developed a kind of self-help manual, and Jennifer will go a little bit more into that as far as if you want to sponsor one. So that's where we're at today. We're at National FFA, kind of my dream 5, 6 years ago when this thing was started. Jeff, I guess I'll turn it over to you, let you talk, and I see Doug, if you guys wanted to come up, Jeff, if you want to come up and talk. This is Jeff Shellpepper.
Let me jump in real quick. While the kids are coming up here, I'm going to give handouts to some of you. These are 2 handouts that explain more about what Testrel is, some of the steps that go into planning an event like that. I'm going to give you each about 20 copies. You can take these home, share these with your students, share these with other teachers in your school, and others, and anything else. If you need more copies of it, our booth is just outside the doors here. If you want more copies of those things, let us know. So,
why don't you give that to her? All right, Michaela is the FFA president right now of our FFA chapter, and all this history that John is going over, that's way before any of these students were involved with this program. To them, this is a very simple thing that to them it's probably not that big of a deal, because we do this every year in our communities and it's easy for them. But it wasn't easy when John and I started this 20 years ago. And that's where I think, what states do we have represented here? What state, where are you from? Arkansas. New York? Tennessee. How about the back row there? What states? Wyoming. Minnesota, we have a wide variety. Illinois? Indiana? Arizona? Okay. Well, in Nebraska, this is a huge issue. I'm not sure how the aquifers are in your states, but with the overall aquifer being underneath Nebraska, water quality is a real important thing to us. And again, the students don't understand the big picture sometimes at their age, but they do understand that they're helping out their community, and they understand that people are interested in what they're doing, but they're having fun, and before the year's over, they've learned, like John said, they've learned, and then people look at them like, wow, they're really doing some neat stuff. They don't even realize it when they're doing it, how important it is. The program is pretty simple to us. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and done some things that we shouldn't have done. And hopefully you guys, by being here, can benefit from our mistakes. And so ask questions if you don't understand what we're going over. Hopefully we can save you some time and make it easier for you if they're interested in doing. We use this as a community service activity, and it helps the students, puts them in a position of being the teacher. While I'm doing this, I'm going to have them start doing a water test. It takes about 10 minutes. So that way, hopefully by the time we get through explaining this, and maybe Michaela talks a little bit about the kids' involvement, that the test will be done and we'll see what we got. I guess we're testing some of the water right here in town is what we're testing. But, yeah. I have a noise in here. What? Okay. When the program first started, the health department and the Groundwater Foundation, mainly the health department, and the NRD, we have natural resource districts also in Nebraska. They educated me and the students on water, on groundwater, on the testing programs, the equipment. But right now, when we have our water testing nights, the older members teach the younger members. So they look over the shoulder, and it's something you can learn really quick. But to be able to answer the questions like John was talking about, when a farmer asks you a question about nitrates or the effects of nitrates on young children, those are the kind of things that these students have to listen to the older members or to me or to John, and then they can answer those questions eventually too. But when we started out, we went through a really big education program to educate the kids, and it was during class, it was after school, it was at different times. But we're at the point now, we've been doing it long enough where it's just ongoing. It just goes by itself, and they're teaching each other. The students are passing the knowledge on to each different class. So, again, hopefully we can do this, and you can learn from us. And if you want to do this, this is something that's not going to be hard because of the mistakes that we made. You can learn from. Get them started on a test first, and then I'll tell them some more. So, go and tell them about what the machine is and what you're going to be testing, and Josh can start the test. So our last testing program was in December. We do this every December. So this has been almost a year now since we've done this. So these students are going, okay, how do we do this? So we'll see how they do. We haven't rehearsed this or anything. So. Yes, and that's a good point. This is a nitrate testing program, but during the process, there's lots of education that goes on about other pollutants. And when a farmer does get high nitrates, then we refer them to the health department, or they can get tests for other things, pesticides, whatever they want. And we offer the program free to the farmers because there's really no cost to it except for the little vials there. Once you have a machine to test, there really isn't much of a cost to it. All right. Michaela's the president. She'll kind of go through what's happening. Give it a shot.
Okay.
So first we start off by just turning the machine on. You just push the simple on-off button, and we turn it on. And then you take the sample of water that the farmers brought in. You're just going to transfer it to a plastic cup like we have there. And then you're going to take the vials and you're going to crack the top off underneath the water, and then it'll fill itself up once you break it. And then you're going to put your finger on the top of it and just for 1 minute tip it back and forth. Yeah, and then for 1 minute you're going to just tip it back and forth, and that just mixes it up. And make sure the tip is fully submerged in the water when you break it, because there's a substance in there that mixes with the water. And then there's a button on the machine that you push that sets it for 1 minute, so you know exactly how long it is, and then it counts down for you.
Now, we've done this testing program at county fairs, we've done it at conventions, we've done it mostly, though, in towns.
And then basically what's going to happen is when the time is up here, the clock is going to reset itself to 5 minutes, and in that 5 minutes the water will start turning like a color. And then after that you're going to fill the test tube with at least 10 milliliters of the unused well water that the person brought in. Right. And then you're going to stick it into, there's a hole there, and you're going to stick the cap on it. And then you're going to make sure that the machine is set to blank. And then once that's done, you're going to press 0, and then it's going to collaborate it. And then
that's called zeroing the machine and making sure that it's accurate. You're getting it preset right now. Okay, set for 5 minutes?
Yeah, it's
okay.
set for 5 minutes. And then you push the 0 button, you zero it out, and then you let it sit there for that 5 minutes.
And you can see that the vial is starting to change colors already. So, and if it's totally clear, you have 0 nitrates. And we get everything from 0 to 30. It's in parts per million of nitrates. Now, this machine will test for other things too, but we just buy the vials and do nitrates.
And then when it gets done after that 5 minutes, the machine will read the sample for you and tell you what it has in it. And then normally after that we have slips of paper and we write down on there for them what their water's doing for them and if it's good or bad. And then we hand it to them, and like I said earlier, they normally compare it with other people in the room and like to talk about what everything's doing.
The sources of nitrate pollution, while this is, we'll wait 5 minutes for the results here. So just a couple more minutes, we'll have our answer of what the parts per million are of the water that we're drinking here in Indianapolis. But the source of nitrate contaminants are fertilizer, farmers' fertilizer, and town fertilizer on our lawns and golf courses and things, but also manure, any kind of organic or inorganic fertilizers are a source of nitrates, yeah. Anything below 10 parts per million is what the government is saying is less. See, this program, at least what we found is best, is for rural water. Any type of city water system, we pay taxes to have someone test that water. And we've had communities, lots of them, that because of we're a farming state and our groundwater is some places it's close to the surface. And we have some places where the town water gets contaminated with over 10. So then they put up a sign, make calls in these small towns saying, don't drink the water, especially if you're pregnant, right? Or if you're a small child, don't drink this water. Well, so that shield, that protection is there. We're paying taxes. But if you live on a farm or in an acreage and you have your own private well, who tests it? How do you know if it's safe? It's true in all your states. Nobody tests it. That's the need. The need is there because there's no guarantee what you're drinking. And so that's why the program is successful. We get people to bring in their water, and they have never been tested. They've raised their kids up on that, and they don't know what's in it. And we've had all kinds of answers.
Will that machine test for bacteria?
We'll test for bacteria.
Whenever you develop that, it can be done with the incubator, and we just never considered it.
Like fecal bacteria, yep. Yep. E. coli.
The one that people probably get incubator.
Yeah. And I know that Hack sells testing equipment for those kind of things. So if that's a need in your community, I'm sure you can do the same program, testing for bacteria or testing for 2,4-D or whatever you're going to test for in your water. But nitrates is common to, I think, everybody, and it's just a way to get the ball rolling about water education, because this is a water education program. They get their water tested. How much time do we have left? Okay, we have about a minute left. And it just gets them thinking about how important that their water safety is. Yep.
As far as the nitrates, you can abuse your nitrate water to some extent. You know, you bring it in a clean container. If you're looking at coliform or bacteria, you would have to pre-send out the containers and have them fill it. Although with what they call a coil alert system, which is used by most and approved by EPA, once you got your 100 ml sample, all you need to do is incubate it, and it's a present or negative. It turns yellow. You got coliform. If there's no color change, it's negative. So it could be done. We just never have pursued it that much. The NRDs would like to see some additional testing by FFAs. The NDEQ would like to see more projects developed through student projects, especially like routine sampling on most probable numbers, and they put the equipment out there. It's just at this point in time we just haven't had time to focus in on it, and Jeff doesn't know that, but we're going to be talking later, because there is some interest in developing the watershed approach and doing most probable numbers and total dissolved solids and things like that, and there may be some money out there through our EPA and our NDEQ, which we will take a look at and work with the students, because what we found out is the benefits back on the public and on the student side pay dividends for life. It's environmental lessons for life.
What'd you do?
Just to reiterate, when we have these events, we don't even show at them anymore. In the first 2 or 3 years, we would come to answer the high technical questions or any kind of tough questions. We'd sit on the sidelines and let the people come and let the students run it. If they got into a problem, then we would jump in. The highest we've ever seen for drinking water in Lancaster County was 63 parts per million. The students tested it 3 times. We sent it down to state lab to confirm that. It was 63. When the kids popped that number, they said, we don't know how to approach this, and they got us off the sidelines, and we went over and talked to the people and got them a bottle of water immediately because they had kids involved. They had bought the house and never taken time to test it. We also know down in Superior, and this is, again, in life's lessons, people had participated in Superior's Test Your Well events. They sold their house. The buyers, she was 7 to 8 months pregnant. The sellers knew that she was pregnant and said, you need to have this water test because we've been to Superior's Test Your Well. It's high nitrates for the protection of your baby. We've got a letter from the teacher down there that just verified that. We thought that was awesome. So it is a far-reaching program. The kids have a message to give the people. So not to interrupt, but I just fill in.
Okay. And then when we get all done, it'll beep. And what you're going to do is you're going to take this out after it's all zeroed out, and you're going to stick your vial back in, and then you're going to push read in a couple seconds. It'll bring up a number for you. This particular one is 3.9, so it's fine. But and then when it's all said and done, you have to properly dispose of the vial. Normally they take them from us, and then you just empty out. You just throw those away.
Yeah, what's in the vial is a little powder, and I forget the name of it right now, but it's not like it's going to, not poisonous or anything, but we just put them in an old milk jug usually and put them in the trash. But 3.9?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, rainwater even is in that level and snow is that level, 3.9. It's normal. I mean, most water has nitrates in it. I mean, there's occasionally a 0, but mostly it's going to have a 2, 3, 4. But I guess what I want to pass on to you is some advice on how to, if we're going to do a program, is that we've tried newspaper and newsletters and all kinds of ways of radio station and to get people to bring their water to us. The most successful way that we have found to get people to bring their samples into us is to have an evening, and about 2 weeks before the testing night, you send a letter from the FFA chapter directly to their home. And most of your local post offices will do a mailing to all recipients within that zip code. But you can do what you want, but to mail a letter to them 2 weeks before, that's not too long, not too short. It's about what we found the best time to get them to realize that if it's too soon, they forget. And if it's not soon enough, they can't plan. It's too short notice. So about 2 weeks. And then, the donuts and the pop in the water are nice, but getting their attention at that 2 week time and having it at a place where it's convenient to them, the local town, the local fire hall, the community center, the school, whatever is close to them. And we have 4 different communities in our town, 4 small towns, so we'll hold those in each of the towns every fall, every December, but you can do it whenever you want. But I think that's really critical, is getting that letter in their hands, and not something with the health department stationery on it, or EPA, something with the FFA on it, and kind of disguise it, and they're not afraid of it then. And so when they walk in the door, they're seeing the students, and yes, John's there in the background, but they're seeing the kids, and they're bringing their sample in and handing their jug, their peanut butter jar, or their mason jar, to the kids with their sample, and then we test it. And we tell them it'll take 10 minutes. They sit down. When they're sitting down waiting for their sample, like what you're doing, they have some materials to read about nitrates, just maybe a couple handouts. They can educate themselves while they're waiting that 10 minutes. They can eat a cookie, they can get a bottle of water, and they can read about nitrates. And they're going to ask questions. They're going to ask us, well, gee, I had 9. Am I okay to drink it or not? Or I had a 4. What does that mean? So they all want to have 0. They all want to answer of 0. But it just doesn't happen. And they understand that a 2 or a 4 or 5, even an 8 is safe. 10 is just not. Even 10 is pretty darn safe. But a part per million is like an aspirin in a swimming pool. It's just not very much. But what was your question? Yeah, yes, very simple. Keep it short. A flyer, just a very short thing you can unfold and see, certain town, certain place, time, free, sponsored by the FFA, bring a jar, we say a pint or a quart sample. It doesn't take much, as you can see. We get them in Ziplocs. It doesn't matter, as long as it's a clean container. But that's what we do. It's a great community service activity, and the kids are learning, the community is learning, but it's an educational program for the students and for the community. It gets the ball rolling about how important our water safety is. Anybody else want to add anything besides what Michaela said?
Thank you. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. I had a question about cost before I turn it over to Jennifer to close. We use a Hawk 890, and they run about $900. And the reason we got locked into Hawk, or we use Hawk, was about 8-9 years ago, our department doing nitrates, we're paying about $15 to $20 cost as a state lab. So in order to cut costs, we looked at different units, and the previous administration went to a policy where we use this in our lab, this model, and anything over 5 parts per million now goes to state lab because this is a screening method. Anything under 5 we don't process any farther because we're very confident on the error of margin that we stay under 10. So that's why we developed the Hawk 890. It will do 50 other chemicals. If you're interested in hardness or water quality, you can expand that. There are models that are less expensive. Well, I can tell you this, that we've had 6 of these at Lancaster County Health Department, and when we no longer have the coordinator, if Alliance wants to hold or Superior wants to hold a Test Your Well event, we've been mailing these out to the FFAs along with the vials. The vials cost about 20 cents a piece, so it's about 20 cents a water test. They've lasted for 3 years. They're very durable. We've been very happy with their reproduction. The first 3 Test Your Wells we had in Lancaster County, we had Grandpa disguised as water samples and bring them in 3 different locations just to see how good the kids were. and they all came within 0.1. And at the end of the third time, he turned a sample and he gave that FFA a $50 donation for their work because he was convinced they were doing a good job. You know how grandpas are. So that's why we're using 890. It's very durable. It's a digital readout. You can come take a look at it. We have them on our booth across the hall. Like I said, they've lasted. And let's face it, they still get shipped around. Kids use them. They take a beating. They keep on ticking. They'll keep measuring. So that's why we use them. There are other cheaper ones. There are tests. You can use strips. You can use powders. We've always stayed away from the powder because we felt that it'd probably be airborne pretty soon among the kids, things like that. So we've just stayed with the Hawk. We liked it. We liked their durability and their test results. So at this point, unless there's any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Jennifer to close. We do have a booth over across the road and across the hallway, but glad to answer any questions. So like he said, it's been a win-win for everybody. It's been a great project. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jeff is passing around the colorimeter. You can kind of see what that looks like. As they said, that's not the only test that those colorimeters can do. And before you think about going out and buying one, check around. Your local health department or county extension or someone may have one that they're willing to loan you. So before you think about spending $1,000, ask around, see if people are willing to loan those out. So I'm passing around now a copy of the tester rail manual that we recently developed. If you write down your name and mailing address, we'll send you a free copy when we get back to the office following the convention here. And basically we developed the manual kind of as a how-to. We were beyond the point where a statewide coordinator could cover, and go regionally and go nationally. And we think it's a great program that FFAs everywhere can do. So Lincoln Lancaster County Health came to us and said, we know you guys have a national network and you guys know how to market this. We want you to develop a manual. So we put this together. This has a lot of information in there about suggestions for holding your events and things to consider. And then the main chunk of the manual is a resources section. We want to make the event as simple as possible for you guys to develop and put on. So there's a whole section in there on resources. There are sample letters. There are sample forms. There's a CD in the back of the manual that has electronic copies of all those forms. You can just put it in your computer and print out those things. So it makes it a little simpler for you, fewer steps to work on as you go about implementing it. Also on the CD-ROM is a PowerPoint that the Norris FFA that John talked quite a bit about developed. It provides a lot of background information, basic information about groundwater, about nitrates, about private wells, and those kind of things. It's fully narrated by the students, so it's a great way to get your students acclimated to what all these concepts are. Also as a companion to that, there's a glossary in the back of the manual, just basic vocabulary related to groundwater and those kind of things. Also on that CD-ROM is just an introductory PowerPoint about what tester well is. If you're trying to get other teachers or your students or whoever involved, you just kind of want to spread the word as to what the program is. That's on there as well. So